This is where's the share screen? Oh, there it is. Nope, that's it right there. Right? And then I can do it like that. You see that? Right? Okay. All right. So I just put this together actually a little bit yesterday, like late yesterday, and then worked on it this morning just to kind of summarize it because we talk a lot about this in the group, and it's a lot of what people have to do because, like I said in one of those answers, you don't really see a lot of women have a lot of experience with intentionally eating more because it's so counterintuitive to to what the message is around fat loss, which is eat less and less and less. So you can get away with that when you're younger and you have more stable hormones and more kind of metabolic resilience. You're not as stressed and things like that. But over time, um, you get consequences that build up that make things more challenging. So what complicates, the dieting history in a person who's over 40, who, anybody falls into the category that we like, which is look like you train, you want to look like you work out, you like the gym, so on and so forth. That person is definitely going to have some type of dieting history. And then if you throw in perimenopause on top of that, then you have a stressful but natural change that's happening, and then a stressful but unnatural change or consequence from the dieting history that mirrors that and is additive to it. So it makes it more difficult. So I always say someone in perimenopause who has a really colorful dieting history will be definitely more symptomatic during perimenopause because they're coming into it kind of like weak anyways. So many women over 40, like I say here, with a history of dieting, often struggle with weight loss plateaus and metabolic issues. Let's talk about how to rebuild your metabolism through a metabolic improvement phase and reverse dieting, why this works, how long it takes, and what biofeedback markers to watch for along the way. So when we talk about metabolic adaptation, there was a term that was, even I used it way back in the day, it was metabolic damage. And Scott Abel was the first one to probably talk about, metabolic damage. I think I was right behind him. But that term, your metabolism doesn't get damaged, so it's an inappropriate term. It's more likely or more appropriate to use either adaptation or, in extreme cases, dysfunction. But the adaptation component, there's two components to this metabolic adaptation that are going to affect your ability to lose weight on a given calorie intake. And one, if your body weight drops, say, 20 pounds, then you obviously have adaptation to the lower body weight that is not going to be undone unless you gain the weight back. So heavier people require more calories, lighter people require less calories. Even if you and I eat the same relative 20% calorie deficit, I'm 230, I get to eat more than you, right? If you're 110 or 15 pounds, it's way harder because you have to eat so little. So the one component of adaptation to a calorie deficit is weight loss. It's not undoable unless you regain the weight. That's obviously not the goal. That's not adaptive thermogenesis. Adaptive thermogenesis is the component of your metabolism that adapts to whether you are eating a lot or eating a little, right? You're going to have different upregulations and downregulations of systems based on calorie intake over time. So metabolism isn't broken or damaged. Oh, a typo. But it's incredibly adaptable and adjusts over time to both your calorie intake and expenditure. This is called adaptive thermogenesis and directly influences your metabolism and calorie requirements. It's a survival mechanism, but over dieting, which is really under eating for time, will disrupt it, causing reduced metabolic function and calorie requirements. So this is the person who basically is maintaining on a lower than they should be calorie intake. I'm eating 1,500 calories at 150 pounds and I'm weight stable. That's not normal. So that's just not a healthy place to be metabolically. Sure, there's still a calorie deficit that exists for you. It's not like it's not possible to lose weight even at this low maintenance intake, but you're going to suffer because you're going to have to go lower, which is going to also continue to stress out your metabolism, probably show up with more red flags, so on and so forth. So, and at the same time, if you can lose fat and squeak it out through that effort, Where do you go from there on the other side of that? That's what you have to think about. You're basically trapped in this ultra low calorie, ultra metabolically suppressed state. So, impact of chronic dieting. I got to move you guys up here. Impact of chronic on and off dieting. So, obviously, reduced basal metabolic rate, reduced NEAT. So, this is just calories burned from non-structured activities. Could be fidgeting, could be walking, things like that. Poor recovery, gym performance. So you're not recovering. Maybe you're sore longer than you should be. Maybe you're not progressively overloading on a program that you really should be, like the one we're doing ourselves. The reduced calorie needs through this adaptation, like I said, obviously makes fat loss not impossible, but definitely more difficult because the only way to get into a deficit if you're maintaining on low calories is to go lower calories, which again, that's reinforcing the problem that you have to begin with. So reverse dieting and strategically increasing food take is a large part of the fix. Not the only part, but it is a major part of it. Okay. Okay, the primary goal is to systematically increase your calorie intake as quickly as possible, but as slow as necessary while mostly maintaining your overall body composition. What does that mean? If I could have you go from deficit and maintaining at a low intake right to the appropriate intake, that would be ideally the best. However, you wouldn't be able to handle the digestion probably, and you would get fat. The reason I say this would be the best is because the healing, which I'll say in a second here on another slide, isn't the climb. It's the time you're at maintenance when things start to really improve. They will systematically start to improve a little bit too, but it's really the time at an appropriate intake that matters. So the reason why we say as slow as necessary is because it has to be as slow as necessary to prevent unnecessary weight gain. That will require longer dieting to get back off and just mess you up more so in the process. So this helps to undo some of the deficit-induced adaptation caused by dieting and helps reestablish a healthier and more resilient metabolic foundation. Resilient means slower to adapt to the deficit. If you run right back in to a calorie deficit, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but if you run right back into a calorie deficit too quickly, then you will have not built up or reestablished enough metabolic resilience, and you will experience the biofeedback red flags and all the diet obstacles sooner in your
How the
deficit.
colors are always
So
funky or
key
the
benefits.
online ordering, yeah. Especially
Where's
on
the
Insta.
meeting
Where'd
room?
you order from? That
Okay. Key benefits. The ability to maintain body composition and body weight at a higher, more sustainable, and more appropriate level. Missing a word. So it's really body composition. But since we're not measuring body fat, you're really going to, for the most part, rely on body weight. There can be a small increase in body weight. And sometimes, if you've come from an extreme place, some fat gain is just part of the healing process. And your body is going to just do that. If it's doing that on a really low intake, that should really tell you something, anyways. That's not healthy. It's not normal. It's in a fuel up in a crisis, conserve energy type of place, not healthy. So, um, I just had a brain fart there. So, anyways, let me get back to these key benefits. The ability to maintain body weight. Oh, yeah, I know what I was saying. Since you're not going to see a large fluctuation ideally in body fat, right? And you're not going to see a large change in muscle mass at any point, no matter what you do in any small amount of time, there's going to be fluctuations probably in water. So when you raise a calorie intake, maybe there's some bloat, some heaviness, some fullness, some digestive speed that hasn't caught up because that one, body is not used to digesting that level of food. And two, you got to remember the stress relax response is fight or flight, rest and digest. So the whole point of this unbalanced seesaw with adding food is to do this over time. So digestion, as the load comes off the stress side, uh, is going to be reactivated as more of the parasympathetic side of your nervous system gets activated. So It's for the most part weight stability, but it really is technically body fat stability. We're just using weight stability within a little bit of give and take. I mean, you could also have a little bit of weight gain on the scale because you have more carbohydrates, which are going to store more water in your muscles. Technically, if you had a body fat test, that would register as lean body mass, not body fat. And you'd be like, sweet, I just gained 3 pounds of muscle or 2 pounds of muscle or whatever it is. It's just glycogen induced water retention in the muscle from more fullness. It's good weight. So this will also reduce the stress of a calorie deficit. So this is what undereating does over time. We're talking about people who have done this many times without undoing it any times. So there is stress to chronic undereating over time. It's more so once you're over 40 and you have naturally changing hormones anyway. So this allows a gradual improvement in energy, hormone stability, recovery, and ultimately a renewed metabolism. So improve fat loss at a higher calorie intake when re-entering a deficit. That's the key benefit. Renewed fat loss at a normal food intake when you try to lose fat again. Is it right for you? Biofeedback will give you indicators of hormone and metabolic instability. So this is things like cravings, hunger, energy, stability or lack of stability in things, digestion, bowels, a lot of times you'll see libido low anyways, uh, sleep disturbance changes, recovery, energy in the morning. All of these biofeedback indicators will let you know if you're stable or unstable. And when you're unstable, you're more symptomatic. And this is not a body that is responsive, it's more reactive. Do you have a dieting history? Yeah, you do, probably. Never, have you never intentionally eaten more to undo the effects of eating less? Yeah, it's probably right for you. Dieting, low calorie, high stress history, you're stuck on low calories, you're experiencing frustrating metabolic stalls, and or you're navigating the unique challenges of perimenopause. Yeah, probably. It's right for you. Let me just make sure no one else jumped in here. Okay. How to do it. First, you have to know how much you're eating, right? You have to know how much you're eating. I say this all the time, but nobody is going to get in shape with a passive approach to their nutrition without any structure of any degree and just kind of willpowering and eating healthy. There has to be some type of structure especially if you're in a place of wanting to make changes. So you can't troubleshoot what you're not tracking. You can't make changes to an intake you don't know uh, what it is. You don't what for which you don't know what the intake is. And if you have an erratic, inconsistent amount of eating in terms of calories on a daily basis, you also can't go through this process. So it starts with actually having a plan that houses your calories that you can have stability and good follow through around. So you have to know your baseline intake, whatever it is. It could be, you know, super low, it could be a bit low, whatever. From here, you're simply adding small amounts of food on a regular basis. Not going to be protein because that should be already pretty static. You're eating enough as it is, mostly carbs and fats. My way is to predominantly do it for more carbs on training days and more fat on off days. But overall, they're both going to come up typically in pretty much every case. Step three is to track your weight, your clothing fit. So, fitted clothing in particular, that's going to catch everything. And your biofeedback, like I said, sleep, recovery, hunger, mood, training performance, things like that. Step four is adjust based on data, not fear. This is the point. And this is ultimately why most people need help, some hand holding, some objectivity, some accountability, because you're basically wanting to lose fat, maybe struggling to lose fat, frustrated that you can't lose fat, and now you're being told to eat more and hope that you're not going to gain weight doing it, right? So there is an understandable fear around that, but it's not based on data. You have to do this based on data. There's no, I was saying to someone yesterday, there's no door three. There's door one and there's door two. There's no third option. It's either return to the insanity or do it the right way, right? So once you get to 14 to 15 times body weight, you got to hold steady there before you reduce again. The magic's at maintenance, not getting to maintenance. You need to create stability at a good, healthy calorie intake. Just did that, didn't I? Maybe that's a repeat slide. I did that. The hard truth about maintenance. Climbing isn't healing. Most women mistakenly believe that once this happens all the time, and I get it. Once you hit the calorie intake that you should get, okay, I did the hard work, I climbed the calories, I was patient, now I get to go right back down. You don't. That's why I said ideally we would be at maintenance overnight because that is when all those improvements would happen, would start. They would be optimized, but we're not. So the climb is only to prevent you from gaining fat, to allow your body to adjust to the calories digestively and to not wig you out about just all of a sudden. Not to mention, you probably can't even do that. If somebody was eating 10 times body weight, to go to 15 times body weight would be a 50% increase in their food overnight. It's just not practical, right? So you can't immediately reverse gears and head back down. The real healing happens during the time you're at a consistently appropriate calorie intake. It's during that time. So obviously, common mistakes, cutting calories too soon after doing this whole thing successfully right. I hate seeing that. You just did all it's you just did it all correctly. Got your calories up to this point, and then you're abort or you quit or you just can't handle it anymore. That's so frustrating after someone's done it so well. Expecting immediate fat loss after increasing calories. Sometimes this happens actually. There is often, let me not say that right. I'm not going to say often. I couldn't say often or sometimes. It happens where people lose a bit of weight on the way up. I can't say it's going to be automatically fat loss, but there's definitely a water inflammation drop from the decreased stress that comes from decreasing stress. So that can appear like fat loss. It's definitely weight loss. And in other cases, there's a bit of weight gain. It is what it is. But also keep in mind that when you're eating a lot of food and you're training really hard and having productive workouts, doesn't it stand to reason that maybe some of this weight gain might be a little bit of muscle too, right? Fearing weight gain when you're raising calories or staying at maintenance for long enough. This is a common mistake. Aborting and returning to the definition of insanity, reducing calories and returning to what got you in this mess to begin with. Consequences of cutting too soon. Your metabolism will not fully adapt or stabilize. You will not have enough resilience rebuilt up, and the deficit will hit you harder sooner. So likely to experience biofeedback red flags sooner in your deficit, which not only means uphill fat loss, not impossible though, but also makes the entire effort just more difficult. Why time at maintenance matters. So these are some of the things that happens. And again, this isn't an on-off switch. It's adaptive, which is why it takes time to like it takes time for the problems to occur, right? It takes time for the healing to occur. And think of it like a car accident. Fender bender doesn't take that long. Little bit of adaptation doesn't take that long. Full-blown car crash, well, that's a longer repair process. So the more extreme the dieting history, the more messed up that body feels or you feel like in your body, the longer time it takes. It is what it is, unfortunately. Okay, so what do we see? We see improvements in thyroid hormones, uh, low calories. I mean, what you often see in competitive circles, in competitive female bodybuilding fitness figure, is thyroid problems after years of competing, after years of all of the extreme dieting, excessive cardio, low calories, low carbohydrates. You see a reduction in thyroid output, and a lot of these women end up on medication. So we see an increase in thyroid hormones, improving metabolism and energy levels. We see an improvement in leptin, which is your fullness hormone, which helps to regulate hunger and cravings. Connected to that, ghrelin, which is another hunger. This is your hunger hormone. This lowers. So these two hormones work together to regulate hunger and cravings. So this is going to contribute to more stability around your hunger and cravings. When you don't have stability in these issues and you got wild hunger, up, down, cravings, up, down, you're not in a good alignment place. Estrogen and testosterone normalize. So obviously there should be an asterisk here because if we could say that confidently in a non-perimenopausal or menopausal situation, but obviously we have natural changes to these hormones that are occurring just
Are,
by nature of,
sorry, are you sharing your screen or supposed to be? Because you're not.
yeah, it says I
When
am,
you no, when you just said the asterisk thing, that made me think, uh-oh.
but it says I'm
Oh,
sharing.
wait, never mind. Okay, I see it now. That's weird. Sorry. Carry on.
Okay.
New feature.
Um, in a perimenopausal or menopausal woman, these hormones are changing anyway, regardless of kind of food influence or training influence, so on and so forth. Obviously, having a strong approach to your lifestyle, your nutrition, your training is going to regulate this better than if you were wildly inconsistent with everything you did. You'd be more symptomatic, and these things would be you'd be adding that unnatural effect of lifestyle onto the natural effect of perimenopause, right? Insulin sensitivity improves. So this is better, leads to better blood sugar control, better fuel utilization, and ultimately better fat loss. We know insulin resistance is connected to chronic high stress, which then is going to be part of the reason why you experience a redistribution in body fat during perimenopause or high stress seasons around your midsection, your belly, right? Cortisol is going to decrease to a degree, right? So when people talk about hormone balance, I don't like the term balance because it doesn't really have a good definition, and people kind of just use that term without really understanding it. What you're really talking about is stability. Think about HRT. There's a certain time you dose these things to have a stable level of hormones, because when hormones are relatively stable, you are not experiencing symptoms. When they're all over the place, you are experiencing symptoms. So when you are eating more and reducing stress in the body, that master hormone cortisol, that dial gets turned down, which takes pressure off all these systems downstream that are under pressure because your body's under high stress, right? So that's right at the top of the pyramid, is reduce the stress in the system. And that's why all these other areas, leptin, ghrelin, estrogen, testosterone, insulin sensitivity, energy flux, progesterone stability, again, to a point in perimenopause, that's going down anyways, but high stress will crash it as well. Ghrelin, cortisol, slower metabolic adaptation. This is the other reason you do not adapt to a reduction in calories as fast the longer you've eaten high calories. It just takes more. It's like antibodies. You get sick and you have something happen and you have antibodies there to defend you the next time it sees that threat much sooner. They're on guard. Well, your body's on guard too. And if you go into this deficit too soon, you will meet the calorie deficit antibodies, and they will let you know that it's too soon. Okay. What else I got? I gotta figure out how to, whoops. How long should you stay at maintenance? Okay. So the ideal optimal strategy would be the equal time dieting maintenance rule, which is if you dieted for 6 months, the ideal optimal would be 6 months. The problem with this is that most people are not done their fat loss, and it's difficult in that context to buy into that, even just mentally and emotionally. So if a person was in a place where they were totally in control. They were just kind of alternating. I would say, take Amy, for example. So in shape, the way she wants to be, she would be someone that would adopt this equal time dieting and maintenance rule because she's lean enough. Let's say I wanted to build, I'm going to do it for 6 months. I would diet. Let's say I was dieting for 6 months. I would be out because there's not an overall large fat loss goal still to accomplish. She's in like fine tuning phase, right? So what matters most in this decision is whether your metabolism and your biofeedback show you signs of full recovery, right? What does the biofeedback say? What does your sleep say? What does your energy say? Things like that. If you've been dieting off and on for years without structured maintenance, ever having done this, you likely need at least 3 to 6 months of steady maintenance intake before cutting again, at least. So the biofeedback markers, are you ready? You stay at maintenance until you see these signs. One, stable weight fluctuation. So you don't see these large shifts in body weight. You don't go out for dinner and gain 7 pounds of water overnight, things like that, which you just can lose, but still, you don't see that kind of stuff. You have a relatively stable body weight because you're eating a relatively stable calorie intake. So why wouldn't you have a stable body weight? Two, you have stable energy. There's no afternoon crashes. You have decent morning energy. You don't have to be like Energizer Bunny, but you're not like dying in the morning, right? You have strong training performance. If you are not recovering you are not going to see progressive overload. And I would not say on any training. I know my training is built around progressive overload. I expect everybody to make good strength gains. Otherwise, I know you're doing something wrong because that's the default would be progressive overload. So if you're not recovering. So that's another biofeedback sign. You have better workouts, you get better pumps, you have better gym progress, you have better recovery. All these things are improving. Hunger and satiety regulation. So you don't have the instability around hunger fluctuation. It's pretty consistent. Cravings, they're a real part of life. So they're kind of there, but they're not like wigging you out. They're not extreme. They're not enough to make you pull your hair out, things like that. And you have restored or improved sleep, mood, recovery. Again, stability. The key is stability. Just contrast stability with instability. Stability is where the maintenance magic is. Instability is where you're like, I need to get out of this deficit. More time at maintenance, easier fat loss. So if you rush back into a deficit too soon, like I said, you don't build up the resilience, you will have faster metabolic adaptation, which means harder, not impossible, but slower fat loss. So the longer you stay at maintenance, the more resilient and adaptable your metabolism becomes, and the better your body gets at handling more food while maintaining weight, making fat loss easier when the time comes. So this is inefficiency. We would think someone might say, this is, oh, my metabolism is more efficient. It's more inefficient. And inefficient means that you can eat more and maintain your body weight. Think of uh, um, I always use this in a cardio example, but a four-cylinder Honda Civic versus say a V10 or a V12 or a big gas guzzler. The four-cylinder car is very metabolically efficient. It gets a lot of mileage for 20 bucks of fuel. You don't want to be that. You do not want to be that. That's the person who can't lose weight. That's the person who would be better suited running marathons. However, this big fuel hog here needs to keep churning through gas, pumping up gas frequently to get the same mileage output. That's metabolic inefficiency. That's a body that requires more calories to maintain itself. That's where you want to be for fat loss. So this means fat loss will become much easier when your metabolism is actually prepared for fat loss. If it's on the defensive, it's just not going to happen very well. The psychological shift, eating more without fear. So I think this is an issue for a lot of people, and this is why I would say it if you recognize that this is what you should be doing at some point, and honestly, everybody should do it at some point, and you're not willing to do it on your own, then you have to get some objectivity in your life and get some help. Use the group, get a coach, put yourself out there, have a buddy. There has to be something that pulls you through this because the most difficult thing about this, and any of my girls I know can attest to this, is the mental and emotional component of it. Because you want to lose fat, and here I am intentionally eating more food. I'm not losing fat. I feel a bit fuller. My data might be pretty stable, but I just feel it, and that is a reaction to just that whole process. It's totally uncharted territory where you have no experience. Of course, it's a bit, stressful. So common fears, I'll gain fat. No, not if done correctly. Now, I should have rewritten that. Not necessarily. In some cases, yes, you're going to gain a little bit of body fat. You're not going to explode because if you did, well, calories can never go up to that level for that to happen. That's kind of the point. You're taking a baseline intake of food, you're adding a small amount of food, looking for stability at that body weight and not increasing again until you have it. So, okay, 150, I hit 152, I went back down to 150 or 151. I would bump that. If I gain 155, that's going to stabilize. I'm not going to be raising calories until I'm stable, right? So if it's done systematically, you minimize the actual body fat gain. And remember, the key thing I'm saying here is I'll gain fat. Not all weight is body fat. I'll lose progress. No, you'll create a better metabolic foundation, and you're probably not making any progress right now anyways. So, you know what I mean? You're stuck. Mindset shift. Food is fuel. It's not your enemy. It's the only way. You don't have a chance. I don't care how great our workouts are, how much you walk, how much you sleep, how much you breathe, do breath work. If you are under eating, you're done. You're never going to get there without going so low in calories that you're not even considering what your real goal is, which is to be free of all this stuff anyways, and be able to maintain where you want to maintain on a reasonable and healthy and allowable calorie intake. You will never get there unless you do something like this. If you recognize yourself in the person I'm talking about, it has to be done. The next steps for you, are you under eating? So track your calories. You have to have an idea if you are under eating or not. And the only way I would say that you're not under eating, probably, if you have a plan intentionally built around higher calories already. If you're ready to reverse, you have to start slow, be consistent, be really consistent with your calorie intake. The key is a static calorie intake, right? How can you stabilize at a calorie intake or an energy intake if it's always changing, right? Like, how's that possible? It's just logically not possible. And if you need help, well, you can reach out. You can ask in the group, you can email me, you can ask Amy, you can hire us, you can do whatever. But there's always, hopefully this answers a lot of the questions around this whole thing. I'll probably do this again at some point just to clean it up because I just finished putting all this together today. I didn't get to really read it through very much, but um, that's that. Metabolic improvement and reverse dieting. Yeah, my RMT said I'm the only one, I'm the only person. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I agree, the mental part is the toughest. Okay, cool. Well, 50 minutes. And then on that note, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Good job.